All right, I'm going to do a quick lecture this morning while I'm getting my coffee on the A word, abortion. Dun, 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 or termination of pregnancy. So, I studied civics and political science kind of independently, so I'm really happy with the way my resume is, and I have a dissertation in my field, which is alternatives to incarceration, which is working with people who have sociopathic or psychopathic tendencies, and then kind of gauging other things like reactivity for kind of the chance that they might be violent or their morality, which is like, how they're able to adjust their behavior and whether or not I think they should stay in the community. That's my dissertation in working in the field. I don't have a PhD because as a case manager in a treatment court, like no, very few social workers have PhDs, period. A lot of instructors or professors just have master's degrees. But that's one of the reasons why I feel qualified to lecture or qualified to preach. And it's like a big deal because when you're talking about this type of stuff, even if you're a local politician, you affect a lot of lives. And in social work, if you're unqualified and you do something that you're not qualified to do, it's no different than having an ASAM certification or something on a car. If you don't do the job correctly, the person or the family could die when they're driving to school. So if you're not qualified to work with people, maybe you should, take a course or something, because like my professional accreditation stuff is all available online. But the reason why I like to lecture is because I have a dissertation with some of the best statistics in the field, and I'm a published clinical psychologist. But civics, I didn't study civics specifically, and it's one of the reasons that I stopped short when it came to a bachelor's or a master's program for what I do. I couldn't learn civics or political science like I wanted to. I couldn't study the criminal justice system further like I want to, or the global economy. So I decided, hey, I'll study economics, I'll study civics and political science, and I'll try to pass the bar. It just made more sense with someone like me that went to the state college and had limited money and was supporting himself through school after I was incarcerated, to kind of take that trajectory, that track towards getting what I feel is one of the best resumes in the country to manage people in court. And I like the law, I like litigating, and I am trying to study to pass the bar, or at least take the practice test before I move or something. But for me, I'm funny, and I, was involved with the drug trade for several years, and was an initiated gang member, and I have a felony on my record for narcotics distribution years ago. So almost immediately, I've been through a lot of the social services programs. My clients connect with them, and they like to laugh. And I'm good with people because about when I was in fifth grade, I studied the social sciences through making people laugh rather than science in math, which I took John Hopkins in, and then was an advanced placement in math in one of the best public schools in Vermont. But that's why I feel qualified to lecture. That's why I feel qualified to work with people. And what I'm lecturing about is working with people. Not everybody's qualified. Sorry. If you have an issue with me, you should come talk to me. But what I like to lecture about is the concept, to educate people on the concept so they can think for themselves, and then they can reference things like in a social sciences major. So if I say something that might not be true, or the specific statute federally might not be, then you should reference it. And then you should talk to me like, hey, I'm like, great, that's awesome. I like to think for myself. I'm German. I'll probably sit down alone and think, and then talk to you afterwards. But that's awesome. You're doing your job. You're fact checking. You learned something, right? You understood the concept, and you went off and you reference something. That's how I do stuff in social sciences. But for the A word, I actually use termination of pregnancy. And I spent some time in North Carolina and Virginia, and I actually really respect the heartbeat bill and what kind of, I think it's about 10 states went through to able to have the Supreme Court even hear it. So the Supreme Court's busy, and they're kind of picky with the cases that they deal and stuff like that. That's my understanding, at least. So basically what happened is 10 different states or something like that wrote a heartbeat bill in order to even get the federal Supreme Court to even want to touch Roe v. Wade or even look at termination of pregnancy or abortion. And when I went down there, and I still go down there because I'm thinking about moving to the southern states, like, hey, I really respect your choice. I do. I'm a religious guy. I value my religious freedoms. What you can prove is you're saying heartbeat is a life. And honestly, to me, it's not much different, like, to keep the child alive inside of you than in a NICU. Like, if that's your choice, if like that's what you're voting on as a state, like, then that's your choice, and I respect it. I do. I'm from Vermont. I tend to vote at 42 weeks. My mom's a pretty secular woman who studied biology, and early on she was emphatic that she wouldn't know what to happen. If the worst should happen when she had her two kids and stuff like that. So that's kind of the way that I was raised as a Vermonter, and we're very conservative and very liberal. And opposite ends, but these days we're trending to just very liberal, which is one of the reasons why I'm leaving my home state. Actually, I feel like Vermont culture is dying, and that's what things like Fred Tuttle and Take Back Vermont were about, not being prejudiced or any of that garbage that can kind of go along with that conservative mindset sometimes. But I think I'm going to stop, and then I might do the audio recording like I've been doing. But my name is Kyle T. Wolf. I have an AS Human Services. I got the best education, in Vermont, at a local community college where I got to study with people, from Sudan and Nepal, and people with autism and Tourette's, and people with substance use disorder, people involved in the criminal justice system. It was a great school, and a lot of my instructors had worked in the field for decades, and I did a lot of hands-on assignments, and I worked in the field the entire time. Almost every paper that I wrote through the community college and then through my semester and a half in Castleton was actually on what I was doing in the field. So I specifically studied alternatives to incarceration with a focus at CCV on opiate use treatment, and then like as it really pertains to criminal justice at Castleton. So when you're studying everything that I actually do for a living over those 4 years or whatever through my credits at Castleton, I'm able to basically, be a published author in psychology and have a dissertation rather than just kind of going to school and figuring out what I want to do afterwards. But yeah, I mean, like, this lecture is about termination of pregnancy, and hopefully, like, we've set the stage to have people realize that I really respect the heartbeat bill and what kind of 10 or so states went through for their religious freedom, and what they can prove with science is just that when the heart beats, that's when they feel that the life is being birthed. And it's really just a way that kind of what is it, the 14th Amendment or something is well, I forget what it is. There's one of those amendments that talks about, the person actually being birthed. It's just saying that the person can be birthed at the time of heartbeat versus the time of lining of the lung. And really, it's just like doing the right thing. I mean, it's their religious freedom, that's what they want in their state. But it's like, how do we make this legally with the way the Constitution is written, to do the right thing? And for me, it's really no different than a NECU. Like, if the child has to survive with barely having a lining of the lung at 42 weeks, is it really that much different? It is what it is, but ultimately for me, it's just believing in democracy, and if that's what the people, want, then that's what they want. And with my religion, I actually value life less, so something that I don't think a lot of facilities or healthcare facilities would even allow me to do is to end my own life. I'm a devoutly religious person. I practice Zen, and Harikari is the way that I'd like to terminate my own life if I feel like I can't teach, or if I feel like, there's nothing else to live for, and I've thought about it and stuff like that. But probably not a lot of people would allow me to do that in their facility legally. It's just an interesting thing about. But it ultimately comes down to the word, like, birth, like when a U.S. citizen has rights and when a life is a life, and that's a different matter. I think the Supreme Court ruled on that, and I think I more articulately put words to it another day. But what I'm talking about is the Second Amendment and conscientious objection, and I haven't even actually read the Supreme Court's ruling on that. When was that? I don't know. I think that was over a year ago or so. But I'm known right now in the state of Vermont as the man that threatened the Speaker of the House. And I did no such act. I never got to prove in court. What I did after 3 years of advocating for crisis beds for substance use was write a reminiscence. If you look up the 20th article in the state of Vermont, and the legislature was trying to change our constitution, and what they were saying to the public is that they could permanently change a constitution to permanently ensure a woman's choice, which to 42 weeks, which is just like, this isn't democracy, like, and you wonder why I'm leaving my home state. But to make a long story short, the 20th article says that you have the ability to basically petition the legislature if they're not listening. For 3 years, I advocated, with almost everybody in the state of Vermont for crisis beds. Housing was the biggest hole when it came to substance use care in Vermont. And a lack of crisis beds was costing our state something like between 30 and 40, or more $1 million every year. Last year to 2021, I walked away from working in substance use at a protest because my coworkers refused to work with me. And they, as a collective entity in Vermont, had an all-time high for fatal overdose, which was about 210. That's Vermont's, statistics without me. And the legislature just proposed an $8 billion budget, which is great in a time of recession with some of the stuff that they're trying to do to stimulate the economy. However, that's an extra $1 billion. In the state of Vermont, per capita, per person, is one of the highest tax burdens, especially when it comes to healthcare. We receive per capita more money for healthcare, specifically more money for medically assisted treatments than almost any other state. We're a tax burden federally. We have very few large businesses. We have very few, high-level income earners. We have more medium income earners. But proportionally, the state of Vermont is a huge tax burden. Huge tax burden to 49 other states. Just let that sink in. $8 billion. The legislature increased our budget by $8 billion, and fatal overdoses increased by almost 100. And I walked away. I said, I'm not being a part of this crap. You people are killing my friends, essentially, and you don't have enough common decency, let alone ethical guidelines, to respond to an email. And they took a $38 million bailout for housing for substance use, a few months after I was released from my wrongful detainment as a political prisoner after my protest. But what happened was, after doing this for 3 years, and I tried to communicate with the legislature for about a year. I sent emails to my local politicians and they blew me off, or they said they'd get back to me. Then I wrote a formal grievance just saying, hey, listen, you guys are failing to communicate with me. This isn't okay. My clients are dead. We're wasting over $1 million, whatever. And they didn't respond to me. And then I went up to Montpelier one day, and the Capitol Police gave me the Speaker of the House's number and email and said, talk to her, Kyle. And I just wanted to speak to my local legislator. I said, fine. And I went back and I was trying to work with this dude in her office for something like 4.5 months. And after 3.5 months, I said, I'm going to go take a vacation and do the support your local grower thing. I went down to North Carolina. I went down to Virginia, and I talked to people in those states about local growth and distribution and Black Lives Matter and shielding predominantly black neighborhoods and local law enforcement and stuff. And then I came back after a vacation of camping in some state parks and stuff down there. And I said, all right, well, this is getting nowhere, and I had already sent, I think, a second letter to the speaker in their office saying, this is what it's like to be a federal defendant, and you have no idea the emotional toll that this shit is taking on me, and you just refuse to even talk to me, man. And her aide, whatever, told me that he was going to send me emails and told me he was going to cue me in on stuff that was important to substance use. And I have the best clinical training in the country to do this, man. I have the best statistics, and my statistics are still available on the General Assembly's website. So why there was more important stuff than, 100 people dying and saving $40 million, I have no idea. But I'm a criminal justice reform advocate, and I had to listen to the legislature lie to the people that elected them about changing the definition of unwaged labor so I can't do things like work furlough. It's okay, so this isn't about being black and framing somebody. This isn't about being black and criminal justice reform. This is about votes. And you'll use words like slavery and abortion to get those votes. Bro, it's termination of pregnancy. It's banned termination of pregnancy for freaking over a generation in Vermont. Black Lives Matter, beyond understanding black culture, man, is criminal justice reform. Changing the definition of slavery in our Constitution only does one thing. It makes it hard for me to freaking do work furlough. So I can't get black people out getting a decent job or starting their own business. It is. It's just politics. You're not doing anything to help anybody. You just want to get elected. Anyway, the dude blew me off for 4.5 months, and I sent another grievance to them. You have no idea what it's like to be a federal defendant, bro. My friends are dead because of it. These are the statistics when you act pompous. These are statistics when you act condescending to my clients, and they're not good. And because they're not good, your state wastes hundreds of millions of dollars every year. That was my second formal grievance, and it was to the Speaker of the House's office. And the House does most of the human services bills in Vermont. That's where they get drafted. That's where they get sponsored. That's kind of where they start, is whatever with human service bills. So if I don't have the Speaker of the House's, support, even if I bring her the statistics, through public information or anything else, how do I get my bill through the legislature? Even if we're protesting, if the Speaker of the House doesn't want to do it, how can I make it happen? And if I want to do a protest, if I want to actually have a petition, how do I do that without the statistics? So if the Speaker of the House or the House just isn't okay with my bill passing, it's not going to pass. And who walks into somebody's office and says, here's the reason why you should do your job differently because of the statistics. Like, you just don't do that. So basically I was at a stopping point. Without her or the House's approval, there was no way that my bill was going to get through the legislature. And what I talked about in that second grievance specifically to her office, and I have all these files saved in my email, was the fact that their inaction costs our state something like $40 million every year for our kids to overdose and die. And they still did nothing. So I went on my vacation, I tried to decompress from the stress. I called some people at some other designated agencies and said, hey, listen, I've been asking for one paragraph from your agency for about 3 years. One paragraph to say, these crisis beds would help us, or we don't really think it's something we're interested in. One paragraph, and I was willing to write the paragraph. And that agency blew me off too, and now they're going to have to deal with the civil suit. And what will happen probably is they'll change their ethics and policies within that agency to allow us to trim the fat when it comes to human services budget and provide better care for our clients through actually following NOS ethics. And that's advocating for a living. But anyway, so I chilled out and stuff, and then, I just got sick of it. It's like, I wrote I think it's remnants when I say that, remnants. I gotta say it sounds smart here, right? I have a dissertation sheet. If you look up Article 20, it's similar to the Declaration of Independence that our forefathers wrote. I wrote this Article 20 Declaration, Renaissance or whatever it is, about taxation without representation, and how misallocated money went to, what am I looking for? Was inappropriately allocated. And in doing so, I said, under the 9th article, if I do not receive it, at the very least an email or phone call within a month, I'm going to have to exercise my right to bear arms pertaining to improper seizure from inhabitants, taxpayers, and voters' property, this is by definition tyranny. Our forefathers fought a war over this. Why the 9th article exists, and our forefathers found property to be key in obtaining and keeping 3 God-given rights. So what this is in the Vermont State Constitution, we're allowed to protest the legislature with documents like this. This is essentially like a Declaration of Independence. I'm saying I'm not recognizing your state law. And the Second Amendment, as defined more clearly by the 9th article, at least my understanding of it in the state of Vermont, is I don't have to consent to any law the legislature writes. I don't, and I don't have to because I'm a safe gun owner. I have the ability to serve in a militia. Therefore, I can keep society structured if I understand the Constitution without state government. But I have duties. So if I'm not adhering to Vermont state law, I have duties to keep structured society without the courts, without the police, without the social services budget and stuff like that. But I don't have to pay taxes. Then I don't have to consent to their laws, and I don't have to consent to their laws raised to fund the taxes. Now, the legislature doesn't have power over me. They don't. And it's because I own a gun, ultimately. But there's other things you can do. So even if you're 95 and you can phone your neighbor and say, hey, listen, I'm scared of the guy outside of the window, or, hey, listen, I'm not happy with my taxes being misallocated. You have the right to conscientiously object on the 9th article, in my opinion, Vermont. But what this declaration was, under the what is it, Renaissance? Under the 20th article of the state of Vermont, is me, saying I'm not paying your taxes anymore. I'm not recognizing, your state laws, specifically unrealistic conditions of release, if you read between the lines, and the funding the public and EB program, the way it's written. And that is how to conscientiously object. And 2 weeks before I wrote that Article 29 declaration, what I did was I threw tea, all over the Montpelier Tea Party about 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe it was a month before I went up there for a third time. I went up there and I talked to her secretaries and stuff like that in the speaker's office. And I said, hey, listen, this is a gross misallocation of funding. 3 of my friends are dead. This isn't funny to me anymore. And then I later was told that I was in a restricted area, and that's why a protection order needed to be issued. But, after I talked to people who just didn't seem to care that my friends were dying and that they were taking my taxes for my friends to die when I offered them a better way 3 years ago, I threw tea all over the State House. I said, this is taxation without representation. I'm not paying your taxes. And I didn't inspect my car either. The British Parliament did a similar thing. The Parliament was writing laws that the forefathers didn't agree with in Massachusetts, and they stopped purchasing stamps to regulate things like a free press. I'm not going to pay the parliament to say what I can and can't write in the newspaper. I'm not paying for your stamps. I'm not going to pay the state of Vermont to say, what I can and can't do with my car when the money goes to fund the public Canadian program. I'm a former safety inspector. I know how to service my car. I don't need the state of Vermont my crap. I'm not going to pay them for that privilege either, because they take my money, my friends die, and I'm done with it. But I kind of, after two formal grievances in my Article 20 declaration, we'll use the word declaration, what I did, or decree. I like decree. That's Article 20. And right now I'm in restrictive conditions of release for protesting. So the state of Vermont's taking away my Article 20 right because somebody says that they're feeling threatened by me following the constitutional processes for enacting social change in the state of Vermont. And that somebody wanted to rewrite our Constitution. And I keep saying it's respecting the judicial branch. It's respecting the judicial branch. It's respecting the judicial branch. And I can't leave my apartment right now. They've literally taken away my right to free assembly. And that's Article 20. They've taken away my right to free speech, too. I'm not allowed to post about the transactions of government. So how do we know that I was wrongfully seized? How do we know that this person is misallocating $40 million? How do we know that our taxes are going to our kids overdosing? I can't freely assemble. I can't free speak. I can't withhold taxes, according to them. Every time I swipe my debit card, they're taking my taxes to inappropriately fund the public Canadian program. What do I do? What do I do? The state of Vermont's effectively removed any right that I have. I can't even represent myself pro se to exonerate myself in Washington County. I can't do anything. And it's because they think they have power over me, and they don't. Especially not the legislature. I'm not above the law at all. But I'm not consenting. I'm not consenting to any of this. And that's my right as a safe gunner. It's why I brought a safely stored firearm with me to Montpelier that day. I mean, this is the process that our forefathers put in place when the British Parliament wasn't speaking for them. It's a process that was written into our Constitution by our brilliant forefathers. Read the 9th article. If you don't consent to state law and you can safely serve in a militia, it doesn't apply to you. But state law exists for a reason, for the common good of the people. Meaning if state law is not doing good for the common people, you don't have to follow it. Conscientious objection, was taken to an extreme in the 1960s during their socialist movement. They wanted to use substances. They wanted to have their own communes. They wanted to do their own things that society wasn't okay with. If you understand the concept of the 9th article, what you can do is own your own property, and you don't have to pay the state any money at all. If you don't leave your property, if you are on a self-supporting commune, you don't have to, you don't have to pay the state any taxes at all. You have to pay federal income taxes because you're still a citizen of the United States. You're not a sovereign nation. Unless your state's receded, and then they should probably change their constitution. That's conscientious objection. So the hippie communes, that was conscientiously objecting to American society. But what happened if you studied things like the Manson family, if you studied things like David Koresh in Waco, Texas, if you studied things like federal gun laws during the Black Panther Party, or federal cannabis statutes, or anything else surrounding conscientious objection in the 1960s, what happened is the federal government had to step in and say, cut the crap. Bad stuff happens with this conscientious objection stuff. We're going to have to criminalize certain stuff. So I believe that there is no federal abortion statute. It's a state right, much like a lot of gun rights. But if you talk to me about firearm safety, it's a different lecture. So what happens if you're a conscientious objector like David Koresh is suddenly the federal government needs to put child endangerment laws in place. David Koresh was not a good guy. He was an insecure man that found a way to manipulate some people, but really what he was offering was free property. There were women that couldn't support themselves in the 1960s, and they went to his commune for a reason. They couldn't support themselves. He was an insecure pedophile, and what he was conscientiously objecting to was pedophilia. He's a pedophile. And what he decided to do with his property was be a polygamous pedophile and allow women that couldn't support themselves, that were barely of age or whatever, to live on his property. So that's why ATF got involved. That's why the federal government was able to get involved and bring charges for child endangerment against them. And the issue that they were having is he was stockpiling guns. So he was saying, like, to the state government, I'm a conscientious objector. Please get off my property. We're not recognizing your state law. We're doing our own thing. We're self-supporting on our commune. And that's his right. At least in Vermont, that's the way that the Vermont state constitution reads. But the issue is he was harming people and children that really couldn't consent to that. I mean, if you're not 16, and you're just a kid, you should have the right to go to public school. You should have the right to have a decent life. And you're not old enough to kind of make that choice to vote or anything else. And that's why when you're conscientiously objecting, if you involve kids in firearms, nobody wants that at all. No one wants another Waco, Texas, where kids are burned alive. It was one of the darker points in American history. Don't stockpile weapons. Don't keep kids and stockpile weapons to say that you can do whatever you want. If the federal government has to step in, they'll step in. Nobody wants that. And then I will come talk to you if I think you're, inappropriately, hoarding a weapons cache just to protect our Second Amendment. I'm that type of guy. But what I'm getting at is there's a darker side of conscientious objection. And the darker side of conscientious objection is that if we, the people, decide, hey, a heartbeat bill just isn't working for us. I don't want to consent to this heartbeat bill that we, the people, wrote in 10 or 20 years with our freedom in Vermont. I think I have some property. I think I have proper training as a midwife. I think what I'm going to do is start a commune. And I'm not going to recognize Vermont's ability to kind of prosecute that type of stuff. And I'm going to get into this in all right, so we're talking about conscientious objection, and it actually is, it's gun safety. It's the Second Amendment. So the forefathers, before we were an armed militia, the forefathers came up with a way to put political pressure on the parliament. And how you put political pressure on the parliament? You stop funding them. You say, good luck, bro, sending all your troops over here. You don't have the money to do it. I'm not going to pay your redcoats. Just get out of Boston, bro. That's what they tried to do. And they tried to limit what the parliament could do to kind of regulate that type of stuff with stamps. Stamps is basically like serial numbers or any of the stuff that the state, inspection stickers that the state uses to regulate things. But that was stamps in colonial law. And the Patriots refused to pay that, and they said, well, we're just going to tax your tea anyway. The merchants control that. And that's how I feel, man. Everything that I buy, the state of Vermont has their hands in that pie. It's so I cannot not pay sales tax. Every time I swipe my debit card, the state of Vermont takes my money. I'm renting an apartment. I can't withhold, taxes to local municipalities, conscientiously because I rent. I'll lose my apartment. And I'm not currently employed either. So payroll taxes. How do I withhold payroll taxes from the state of Vermont? To hit them where it hurts. The answer is I can't. So what I've done is basically drag out about, 5 different violations in one criminal case and one civil case, to the point that the state of Vermont has probably spent something like $70,000 to investigate the fact that I slightly raised my voice in a peaceful protest. When I get it through their thick skulls that, investigating me is a gross misappropriation of funds, just like the tax money that they took from me for 3 years to watch my kids die, they might finally understand I don't break the law. What you're doing is wasting the people's money, and you're doing it to investigate a person that goes out of his way to help people. You're a $70,000 tax burden. Sorry, $700,000 tax burden. You know why you're $700,000 tax burden? You're spending all the people's money, all these government allocations to investigate a guy that coaches hockey in his free time, that lectures for free, that tries to teach kids how to do graffiti conscientiously when they're feeling rebellious rather than sell them narcotics, that advocates largely for free, that works in human services for 5 years, that was a Narcotics Anonymous service member for 4 years, that picks up garbage in his free time, that'll do pretty much anything for anybody. That's who you've been investigating. And you spent something like $700,000 to prove that you're incompetent at your job and your criminal justice system wastes hundreds of millions of dollars. That's all you've proven. Taxation without representation. I'd like to know how my taxes went to help my clients. And the state of Vermont refused to answer that question. So now they are. they're wasting something like $700,000 of your dollars to investigate a guy that should be coaching hockey. And the only thing that they've proven in their $700,000 investigation is that overly stringent conditions of release and unnecessary violations resulting from overly stringent conditions of release make up over a quarter of our prison population and cost the taxpayer hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Brilliant tacticians up there in Montpelier, taking your tax money for our kids to overdose and die and be needlessly incarcerated. So what I'm getting at is, if I can't withhold taxes as a contributing member of society, how do I hit Vermont where it hurts? I conscientiously violate my conditions to make a point. You wanted me to do 9 months in jail on 3 different counts of a violation for going to do my laundry half an hour early. You wanted me to do 6 months on a violation for going up to Chittenden County to see my father, to see the rinks and to do a little coaching in the intramural leagues up at UVM and tell stories about the McKinnons and the Childs. To get in touch with my roots, to celebrate my sport, rather than, see my old friends, rather than drink beer in my apartment that I could easily get away with my conditions. You wanted me to do 9 months at $200 a day for going to see Gutterston before they, renovated after everything that I've been through with that rink. That's the state of Vermont's infinite wisdom, to violate me when I go home to see the rink that they built me and my friend. Because I love my sport rather than drugs. The state of Vermont said, hey, we want Kyle to do 6 months in jail for posting something on Instagram, being critical of a government official after 4 years of ridiculing Donald Trump. The state of Vermont said, we want Kyle to do 1.5 years on violations for talking about social justice, and he's the owner of a social justice consulting firm. He's the valedictorian of our state college system. But not only is he the valedictorian of our state college system who studied unnecessary incarceration and its results in the community, our state college system is bankrupt. We can't convince people to come to Vermont to go to it. And our kids, much like Kyle that grew up here as a 4th-generation Morgan horse boy, who grew up at Meadowy Morgan's, is leaving Vermont because of the way we treat him. And he's the valedictorian of our state college system. Not only is he refusing to pay our taxes and our extra $1 billion, he's leaving Vermont. Kyle's the best at what he does in the country, and he's leaving Vermont because of the way we have treated him. And then we expect people to come to Vermont to want to go to our failing state college system. Do you get it yet? It's how you treat me. And 50% of federal defendants, which I was 6 years ago, reoffend because of this. You treat us like garbage, you don't respect us in an occupation other than narcotics distribution, and you wonder why people like me that are highly intelligent and nonviolent commit assaults or go back to selling narcotics at a 50% rate within 5 years. And that's astronomically low. State offenders reoffend within 7 years at a 95% rate, 50% rate within a year. Those are the statistics. And you want to work with me, why? Well, Florida does, Ohio does. Do you think people are going to want to send their income taxes to Vermont to fund things like Hub and Spoke when I start talking about how you guys allocated money? Do you think people are going to want to come to Vermont to keep your state college system alive when I start talking about how I was treated with my state college degree as the valedictorian and some of the best clinical training in the country? I don't. I think Vermont is going to increase their budget until they're bankrupt. And then they're going to, Washington's going to cut your funding. That's what I think. And then for 4 years, you wanted to post stuff being critical of the federal government. And then I post something being critical of state government, and I get violated. And you tell me, your state college valedictorian who studies why unnecessary incarceration is not just a tax burden, but is harmful for the community and the individual. You want me at $200 a day to go to prison for posting stuff on social media that was actually much kinder than a lot of you posted about Donald Trump for 4 years. That's what this is. That right there is actually what your $700,000 have gotten you. And my coworkers don't even know how to cite dialogue on their affidavits, and they want to talk down to a clinical psychologist with some of the best clinical training in the country to work with people who make mistakes. And I have no problem with things like the death penalty. I have no problem with punitive sanctions if they're necessary, but they're just normally not necessary. I have no problem doing the time myself if I make a mistake. I still don't. I might have to do 3 months on this violation crap. And as long as I'm in Northwest where my dad can visit me, I don't care. It's what I'll do for my country. It's pretty much anything. I'm not going to hurt people. But that's what your $700,000 has gotten you. Limitations on free press. Limitations on free assembly. Conditions are really so stringent that I get violated for doing my laundry half an hour early. Or for going to see my father. Or my friends. Or play my sport instead of use narcotics. That's your work, Vermont. That's your work. And you spit in the face of your state college valedictorian, and you actually expect people to want to, one, send their income taxes to Vermont to fund things like Hub and Spoke, and two, send their kids here to go to your school. I'm a published clinical psychologist. I own the rights to the biggest thing since Hub and Spoke. I have some of the best clinical training and the best statistics in the country. How do you think this is going to look? So to make a long story short, I'm leaving Vermont because you don't want to respect my right to conscientiously object. So I'm not on private property. So like, not only am I trying to waste, the state of Vermont's money and I don't like wasting taxpayer money. I don't like harming people. I don't like wasting a judge's time. I was raised better than that. This is just me as an advocate. Trying to enact social justice through tax withholdings like Black Lives Matter and defund the police. But what I'm conscientiously objecting to is overly stringent conditions of release, or things that should be unconstitutional for a social justice firm. I'm saying for the common good of the people, this harms way more than it helps. But the danger when you start conscientiously objecting like that is the federal government might have to step in. Because I'm not recognizing state law, I'm not recognizing funding of state law. Because they're harming people with my tax money. And that's why I keep a bowl of marijuana in my room. I'm not above the law. If I hurt somebody, I want the EA to be able to seize me and put a stop to anything. But when I wrote my decree, I wrote something else on here. The following is a specific request by me, Kyle T. Wolf, a professional with proper training and ethical guidelines, with a reasonable request by fairly current professional standards using proper procedure and processes for something very serious with limited labor pertaining to an audit of state and federal funding, allocation, and spending of the people's property. So do you think anybody should be able to kind of do this stuff, or do you think people get hurt? I mean, that's what we started the lecture with, right? Is I have a dissertation, I do this for a living, I've studied this extensively, I know what I'm talking about with Vermont culture and criminal justice reform and stuff like that. So do you think anyone should be able to do this, or do you think that people will overdose? Do you think that people will be wrongfully incarcerated and have psychological trauma? Do you think that the taxpayer will pay too much and as a result their kids won't get the education they deserve? So a professional with proper training, following National Alliance of Social Work guidelines. So if you're a conscientious objector and you want to do an abortion with a coat hanger, that's not going to fly with me. State government should probably step in. Now, if you're a conscientious objector and you write a decree like that, depending on the Constitution, because you feel that at 24 weeks, termination of pregnancy is harming more people than it's helping when it comes to the child, being born into an outdated welfare system, when it comes to the mother's quality of life suffering, when it comes to the mother's health care, suffering, or the mother's psychological trauma in the case of a victim. Those reasons why termination of pregnancy is a good idea for a lot of us. If you feel that that's occurring and you have training, like a midwife, and you write a decree, what's to stop you from safely terminating a pregnancy up to 42 weeks with a safe procedure? The simple answer conceptually is the federal government. And if you do it with a coat hanger, if you do it past 42 weeks, they're going to craft a federal abortion statute and they're going to indict you, and they're going to make an example of you if you're harming kids. So the real issue becomes, if you're a conscientious objector and you've written a decree and you've told the state government, I'm not recognizing your ability in this matter, I have better professional training than you, I'm not going to fund your efforts to, inappropriately, help these children in social services once they're bored, I'm not going to fund your efforts, towards the courts prosecuting this type of stuff. What happens, at that point is you're making a conscientious decision to object to state law to perform a safe procedure up to 42 weeks. And that's when state government needs to step in and say, hey, listen, this person's not doing the procedure safely. Hey, listen, this was way past 42 weeks. This person's doing some serious time, especially if it's multiple procedures. And they do the time in their state. But people that are poor, that can barely afford their cigarettes, shouldn't have to drive to Vermont to get a termination of pregnancy procedure. So what happens if someone from North Carolina gets indicted at, 31 weeks and the procedure was safe, and it's just state government overstepping their bounds and they did the proper processes depending on whatever their constitutional rights are. There's no guns involved with the property. They're properly trained. They're doing things the right way. The procedure was safe and everything. There's no real victim here. The person receiving the procedure was consenting. They feel that they're acting on the best interest of the woman and the child in this scenario, regardless of the legislature's ability to craft laws. What do? Maybe the person comes to Vermont and maybe the governor says we're not going to extradite them. Extradition treaties. But what happens when, someone that performs the procedure at 50 weeks comes to Vermont and the state of Vermont says, well, it's an abortion case, we're not going to extradite them. Then we have an influx of more people coming to Vermont, which one just ruins Vermont culture for people like me that are just sick of this stuff, that been through the Fred Tuttles and the seeing our farming industry and stuff get destroyed, and just not a respect for Vermont culture, Ethan Allen or anything. What happens is we have an influx of people that come to Vermont, as like a safe haven, like it's a sanctuary city or something. So what happens is, if you're performing a procedure that's unsafe, if you're performing a procedure past 42 weeks or whatever the scenario might be, you need to get extradited back to North Carolina, and you need to own the fact that you did that and deal with the court processes in that state. Because if you don't, the federal government needs to step in and say, listen, these are the last running termination of pregnancy. Be it, gross neglect of a child and child endangerment, or be it murder. And that's what it is. Either you're murdering the life past 42 weeks, or you have a gross endangerment of a child or something like that past 24. I don't know. I'm just snowballing here. But what happens is the federal government has to craft a statute at that point, because people that claim to be Black Panthers are carrying firearms unsafely. Because people that claim to be of a different family or different cultural background are distributing narcotics or using narcotics unsafely. Because people like David Koresh are consciously objecting to harm children, or Charles Manson. The federal government needs to step in and say, hey, listen, you might be a free right, and you might have the right to object to the laws that the legislature writes because you feel that they're not speaking for you. And you don't have to fund, their taxes if they feel like their courts aren't speaking for you. That's your Second Amendment right to bear arms, not keep arms, at least in the District of Vermont. But when there are 49 other states funding this stuff, you don't have the right to say no to the federal law. You don't. You're a citizen of the United States, born in this country, or given, the opportunity through that process, which I'm just not fluent in at all. You need to talk to your local representative. Federal law applies to you for a reason. You can't influence 49 other states' decisions like that as an inhabitant. And the right to bear arms is a necessity to a free state. Meaning militia service needs to stay within state lines, otherwise it just becomes a can of worms and we have anarchy in our hands should it actually happen. But that's actually understanding conscientious objection. And what I'm saying is, there's a way to do this legally. And our forefathers were some of the most brilliant people, ever. And when I spent time chilling with SEALs on SEAL Team 6. They say, Kyle, we know how you feel about SEAL Team 5 and the way you were raised and stuff like that, but we would like you to take a look at the forefathers. Like, we get it, you guys are religious over there on SEAL Team 5, whatever, like, we get it. We want you to take a look at the forefathers, Kyle. That's how we feel about the forefathers. My buds showed up at the Pentagon parking lot in a Nissan truck from the 1980s and said, hey, Wolfie, bro, that Subaru's 15 years, huh? I've been having this Nissan run like a dream for about 40 years. That's what I think about bankrupting our economy. That was the education that I got from some of the guys that served on the teams in the 2000s and stuff about our forefathers and respecting the federal Supreme Court. And I study this stuff for a reason. Not many people on the planet can shoot like me, and I don't think it's constitutional for one person to take democracy in their own hands. But when you think about data collection or, not funding things like Planned Parenthood with state money, what you're saying is the money collected does more harm than good. By collecting these taxes, to fund a termination of pregnancy at 24 weeks, you're hurting a lot more people, than you're helping. And if statistically you can prove that, then you might have a decent case. But I might go to jail, and I might go to jail for my clients. Politics, essentially. I tried to talk to you guys. I tried to have an honest conversation before I damage you professionally or personally, or politically, let alone, have civil action. And you guys made a conscious decision to try to ruin my life. So you didn't care about me at all. I'm a person, I like to do things like sports shoot. I like it when people include me in conversations or include me, in athletic, and what you've done is, ruin me as a person. I was sexually assaulted because he wrongfully seized me. I'm psychologically traumatized because I can't hang out with my friends. I'm on home confinement. This is what you people have done to me as an individual, and you don't care. You don't care at all. What you cared about was re-election, or what you didn't want to do is get sued. And you're still, denying that any of this stuff happened. You won't even release me body cam footage, and it's because you don't want to get sued. And I didn't want to sue you. I wanted to talk to you, but you went on the offensive. I brought up a lawsuit after 3 years of this, and you completely ruined my life and ruined my family name. I want you to think about that, what you've done to me. Because I try to talk to you. I try to shake your hand. And you address the media in a way that ruins my life. You tell people stuff that's blatantly not true. And you did it because you didn't want to get sued, and now you don't want to lose your jobs. And I'm like, there's a way not to lose your job here, and it's talking to me. But now, no. And 4 or 5 or 6 of you already resigned. And I've subpoenaed the body cam footage. Your attorney general's office is scared of me as a litigator. It's like, well, all you had to do was talk to me. And now we're at the point now where the FBI might indict you on things like obstruction of justice, perjury, witness tampering, and bribery. We're at the point now where I've had to recommend to a few ethical review boards that you people lose your jobs. We're at that point because you couldn't talk to me. And what all this comes down to is you just didn't care about me at all. You didn't care about my clients at all, and it all could have been settled, with a conversation.